Most people don't usually think that accounts payable would make an interesting movie. Luckily, Hollywood, Leonardo DiCaprio, Willie Garson, and Matt Bomer did not agree. We've got 3 movies based on real-life episodes of fraud that we'd like to share with you. They are instructive in that they demonstrate how the frauds were committed and how they could have easily been prevented. Well, easily may have been an overstatement. But just in case it's not obvious, I'm going to point out a few basics. And afterwards, we'll also tell you where to find these movies so that you can watch them yourself and you can have some of the fun. Hey guys, I'm Mary Schaefer from AP Now, the place where we focus on all issues related to the accounts payable and payments functions. It's a holiday week when we're filming this, so we thought we'd have a little fun. Let's start with an old favorite, Catch Me If You Can. Catch Me If You Can starred Leonardo DiCaprio playing Frank Abagnale. Everything you might ever want to know about check fraud, you can learn here. He shows you how, in some of the old-fashioned ways, people used to commit check fraud. Obviously, when you look at this, you'll be amazed. Some of those wouldn't be work now. And then he went on to some other frauds. As many of you may know, Frank turned over a new leaf, and he worked for many years for the FBI, educating professionals on how to protect themselves and their organizations against fraud. And if you were lucky and you were able to go see him at a conference, you know you were in for not only an informative discussion, but also one that was very interesting. Okay, I recently contacted him, well, not so recently, it was about a year ago, I think, to see if he wanted to be on this podcast. And he told me now he is working exclusively for AARP. So if you have an opportunity, really go hear him. It's a lot of fun, and you'll learn a lot about protecting yourself. In the United States, Catch Me If You Can is currently playing on Amazon Prime. Plus, you can get it some other places, I'm sure. But remember, where you see a particular movie that we're going to talk about and when will depend upon where you live and when you are watching this, because they change constantly. Every month Netflix comes out with its new list of what they're adding and what they're taking off. Same with Amazon, or what they call it, what's coming and what's leaving. So you'll have to do a little searching on the internet if when you go to look, it's not where I'm telling you it is. So Amazon Prime, at least at the time I'm filming this, is where you can see Catch Me If You Can. All right. The next one, let's move on, is a very different story. It's called All the Queen's Horses. Now, this was about the city controller of Dixon, Illinois. Her name was Rita Crundwell, and she stole $53 million of public funds over the course of 20 years. And she spent it rather flamboyantly. She used it to fund one of the nation's leading quarter horse breeding empires. And she did it at the same time she was ruthlessly cutting services to the city. So why did this go on for so long? Well, there was no appropriate separation of duties. And with the benefit of hindsight, we can realize that if they just used some good old accounts payable best practices, they could have prevented this from happening. And this particular show is currently running on Netflix. Now, let me run back to Catch Me If You Can for one moment. We all know this is based on Frank Abagnale's life, but there was also a TV show that was based on this, and it was loosely based on this because it was about art fraud, and it was called White Collar. And this one stars Matt Bomer. Now, you may remember Willie Garson from Sex and the City, but after you see White Collar, you will only think of him as Mozzie. Now, currently this is on Hulu, but again, this can change. Now, before we get to the last 2, I'd like to suggest that if you like this episode, please give us a thumbs up. And if you loved it, please subscribe. We produce new content for the channel 3 times a week. Tuesdays and Thursdays are devoted to payments and accounts payable issues like this, fraud, but usually not so much fun, but hopefully informative. And we devote Saturdays to Wordle, my newest obsession, if you will. Okay, and finally, I want to talk to you about fruitcake fraud. Yep, that's what they call it, the fruitcake fraud. This is the story of how the Collins Street Bakery's accountant embezzled $16.9 million over the course of almost a decade. Now, if you've gotten a fruitcake at the holiday time, there's a good chance it came from the Collins Street Bakery. This particular story follows the work of an FBI agent and shows how a newly hired clerk, maybe she was an accounts payable clerk, who knows, was able to uncover the wrongdoings. What is interesting here is that the company knew something was wrong. After all, the fraud went on for a decade, and they weren't making the money that they thought they should be making. So they'd had, several investigations, but somehow they could never figure out what was going wrong until they hired this young woman, who I guess is the real hero of this story. This is another case where appropriate segregation of duties wasn't followed. That one simple step would have prevented what happened from happening. Plus, the accountant knew where the weaknesses were in this process. Now, while we were watching this, I kept saying to my husband, where are their auditors? Where are their accountants? Why wasn't somebody coming up with the answer? And towards the end, I got the answer. Okay. The auditors were sending their findings to, drum roll, please, the accountant. The individual doing the embezzling was getting the report on the embezzlement. So, and as many of you know, but definitely not all, you should be having the audit's findings sent to somebody outside the accounting team, usually to somebody on the board. Luckily, this company was able to come out from this fraud, and they are an ongoing concern. So if you're looking for fruitcakes at holiday time, you know where to go. This is a relatively new work. It was released at the end of 2021, and it is available on Discovery Plus, which sometimes has a 7-day free trial. Just saying. And Discovery Plus is available through Amazon. So do you have any favorites of the movies we described or we discussed here? Mine actually was the TV show White Collar. Let us know what your favorites are in the comments section below. Now, I just want to talk a little bit about the last two cases. In these instances, both were long-term trusted employees, people who nobody could believe would steal from their organization. Now, I could go on and on about this issue, but I'll spare you. We did an overview of AP internal controls as they relate to people. I hope these movie reviews brought home just how important this is. You can watch our AP internal control issue on people momentarily. A link will appear on YouTube. We've also got a link to it in the show notes below. And as always, we appreciate your thumbs up, your shares, your comments, and your subscribes. Enjoy.